Hello everyone, I am Miss Lam from Yancha Hospital Arts and Secondary School, and I'm here today to talk to you about the English language examination in the DSE. Let's not waste any more time and get started. So the first overview of the English exam is paper 1, reading. It's 20% of the subject marked, and then paper 2 is writing, and it's 25% of the subject marked. And paper 3, listening, which is the most important paper, as you can see here. It's 30% of the DSE subject score. And then paper 4, speaking, that's 10%, and SBA, which is school-based assessment, 15% of the DSE scores. So now we'll move on to talk about how I could prepare you for your public exam. I'll go through it paper by paper. So I'm going to first talk about paper 1, the reading paper. It's 90 minutes. It's part A and part B. So if you chose part B1, which is an easier part, you'll be capped at level 4. But if you chose part B2, then it will be the highest score you can get is 5 double star. So, but you have to be very careful of which one you choose, first of all. And in my opinion, you should pay a lot of attention to part A. Because if you think about it, part A, it's 1 mark, and if you chose part B2, which is a more difficult session, then it will be another mark as well. So, but if you look at it, I want you to look at the level of difficulty. Part B1 is the easiest, and then part A, and then part B2. So if you get 1 mark in a slightly easier session of part A, then that's worth 1 mark in part B2, if you know what I mean. So we have to be a little bit more clever about which one we choose and whether we become more careful in choosing the questions, answers that you're doing. Reading order, I don't know which one you do first. Some people read the reading passage first and then the questions. Some people read all the questions first and then the reading passage. But in my opinion, you should really do none of those things. You should really read the title of the reading passage and then the first paragraph. And then you should then move on to question number 1. But if you are still uncomfortable or you're still not sure about the reading passage, then you should read the conclusion first before you move on to question number 1. So this is the order you really have to follow. Think about it, if you finish reading the whole reading passage, fine, you'll have a better idea of what it is about, but then you have wasted time on analyzing the questions. So what you should really do is to do both at the same time. And then time management, I think part A is usually about 43 marks, and then part B2 is another 43 marks. You should really spend 1 minute on each mark. So pay attention to that. It's not 1 minute per question, it's 1 minute per mark that you can get. So sometimes in a question, you will have more than 1 mark. So let's say true, false, not given question. It's usually comes in 3s or 4s, so they are 4 marks. So you have to be careful, 1 mark every minute. So that's include reading the passages as well. Another thing you have to pay attention to, as you can see, I've written hint here because let's say you aim at getting level 4. If you want to get level 4, you have to make sure you answer all the questions in level 1, 2, 3, 4 correctly. So easier questions will usually be true, false, not given questions, usually easier questions to tackle. Believe it or not, summary clause is not that difficult. This is what I tell my students as well. True, false, not given questions, you must grasp that. Summary clause, I will tell you later on why summary clause or gap filling questions, you should master it really well. And if you could do that, you can definitely get better scores in the DSE. So here I've also listed the use of past papers. Of course, everyone will know that you should be doing past papers for 2012 to 2021. But if you are clever enough or if you're careful enough, then you will know 2007 to 2011 past papers are also very important because maybe not so important a few years ago, but these 2 years, I would say it will be a current trend that it's become more important, or in a way, because their questions or the type of questions, it's reappearing in recent exam papers. It's not in previous exam papers, but then it is reappearing again in recent exams. So for example, in 2022, in part B1, question 39, and B2, question 64, they're matching options. Those are easy questions. It's one of the questions that I mentioned just now, other than the true, false, not given questions. These matching questions are fairly simple in comparison to the other questions where you have to write long answers. I know you don't like writing long answers, but try matching options. Proofreading, it's also a new form of exam questions that you can pay attention to. You can look at it and it will help you. Usually it's pretty obvious as well. It's pretty obvious, so you can pay more attention to it. For those who are aiming stars, then you have to focus a little bit more on this session. There are more questions now that requires correct grammar. Well, we call it part of speech. So you have to, even though you know the words, you have to give the correct part of speech. Okay, so these are the questions I listed for you that require the correct grammar, the correct part of speech. Sometimes it comes in summary clause, sometimes it comes in fill in the blanks, or timeline, or table filling, but it basically these types of questions. So if you focus on getting these marks, remember just now I said count your scores. Like you have, if you, let's say you're targeted at level 5, then you should be able to answer level 1 to level 5 questions, and if possible, aim for 5-star questions or 5 double-star questions. This is how you should really count your scores. You have to pick up each mark one by one, as I tell my students all the time. Also, quite common questions in part B2 would be poetic devices question. They ask you about your metaphor or simile. And then they also ask you implied meaning of a sentence or a small paragraph, and also the tone. Okay, these are the questions that you really have to pay attention to if you want to score good scores in the HKDSE. So let's move on to paper 2, writing. You have 120 minutes for part A and part B. For 2012 to 2023, you will have 8 questions to choose from. They're linked to the electives of the English learning curriculum. But from 2024 onwards, they will be delinked, and you only have 4 questions to choose from. So what's the catch here? So if you look at it, the score calculation of part A and part B, part A is slightly, well, say, has fewer scores than part B. So, and you're required to write, of course, fewer words in part A as well. Let's look at the common genres that comes up in part A. In part A, in previous years, there were more likely picture descriptions or recount, but the trend these days, as I observed, would be daily encounters. They're pretty easy. They're pretty easy, and things that you will see as a student quite often. So for example, letter to parents, announcements, or this year, the 2022 brochure. So these are things that you will encounter in daily life. It looks simple, okay, it's pretty simple, but bear in mind that it's not easy to get very good score because it's very simple, if you know what I mean. It's simple, but it's very difficult, or it's easier for you to pass, but it will probably be more difficult for you to get good scores. As for part B, these are pretty pretty common genres, or you call it text types, in HKDSE as well. If you can learn these kind of text types in advance, it will definitely help you prepare for better scores in the HKDSE. The trend that I observed is that now the questions are broader in topics, and they do not give you specific requirements in the questions. If you look at past papers, they will give you specific requirements of every question. But nowadays it's broader, the topics is broader because it's delinked, remember? And they also give less specific requirements. It would be more vague. So you will have to come up with what to write in your essay. So ideas development is also very important for you to prepare yourself. And another thing you have to pay attention to is the tone. The tone is super important. This is important not just in paper 2, but also in paper 3. The target audience. So who are you speaking to? Should you be using an informal language, or should you be using a formal language? So you should really think about who are you talking to. Am I talking to my fellow schoolmates, or am I talking to my boss, or am I talking to my parents? So these are the things that you have to have good grasps on before you can think about getting good grades. So here we focus on getting good grades, not just a pass. So for paper 3, it's 120 minutes of the listening paper. There's part A and part B. Again, you have a choice. Choices is not always good, especially when you're really nervous in the examination hall. But you do, again, have a choice of part B1 and part B2. They're pretty different. There are 3 tasks for you to do in part B1 and part B2. The schools, again, pay close attention to it. So the score calculation is part A again plus part B2. The score is part A plus B2. Remember, if you choose part B1, you'll be kept at level 4. So in other words, if you think about it carefully, part A, it's very, very important. In part A, they're bound to be really, really easy questions. It could be just a telephone number, or it could be an email address, but it counts 1 mark. Same weighting as part B2, where you have to listen to the points, you have to read, you have to write to get 1 mark. So part A is very, very important in this way. For part A, if you think about it, sometimes it is always like that. It comes a difficult question, and then suddenly it comes up with an easy question. When you were focusing too much on the difficult question, you lose scores in the easy ones. So this is how it works. So if you can't get it, and you know that you cannot finish that point, forget about it. Forget about it. Just focus, regroup, focus on the next questions that is coming up. So this is something that you have to pay attention on. And another thing you have to do is count your scores. As I said in paper 1 as well, count the scores that you should really get. So let's say, again, if you're a level 5 student, you have to get all the level 5 questions, 1 to 5, and aim for more difficult questions. If you are more skeptical, thinking, oh, maybe I'm a level 4, then you should really count all the marks that you can get for level 1 question to level 4. You cannot allow yourself to lose mark in, let's say, a level 1 question or a level 2 questions, because that makes it more difficult for you to reach a level 4. For part B2, there are 3 tasks. Each task is content scores, 9 marks, 5 marks for language, 2 marks for organizations, and 2 marks for appropriacy. And the trend these days is a lot of students are more used to thinking, oh, it's always 9 marks. I can tell you, it's changing all the time, and it's not the case that it's always 9 marks. Sometimes it's they take some marks from, let's say, task 8 and give it to task 10. So you have to pay attention to that. So it's not always equal weighting. And now the new trend, it's not the same as previous years anymore. These years, not just the last year, but the year before as well, they give 1 mark to each content point, 1 mark to each content point. Previously, they might give 1 content point to more than 1 content points. So this is something that you have to pay attention to. Sometimes it's tricky. That's why B2 is a lot more difficult, I'd say, than part B1. Sometimes it's cheeky. It gives you, each mark consists more than 1 content point. So it is always changing now, and we're not sure how it is going to end, or is it ever going to end, but it's always changing. This is something that you have to pay attention to. So if that task is given more content marks, that means that is the task that you should spend more time on. That leads to what I'm going to talk about next, later. I'll get back to that later. You have to make sure, and I don't know, a lot of students, I've talked to them so many times, and they don't pay attention to the stationery they use. You must prepare 3 colors, okay, 3 different colors of highlighters if you're ever going to get good grades. So 1 color is for task 8, another color is for task 9, and another color is for task 10. So you have to highlight it in a different color. That helps you to do it quickly, because time management is everything. One of the area students should really pay attention is time management. A lot of students cannot finish their paper, the whole paper. If you cannot finish the whole paper, it dealt a great blow to your scores, because if it is unattempted, it can only be awarded 0. If you have written something for it, you can possibly get some scores as well. So never allow yourself to not finish the paper. And in the checklist, usually page 3 of the data file, gives you the number of the pages that you should be looking at. I always call it the checklist, the number of the pages that you should refer to for that particular tasks. So that's something you have to pay attention to. Another thing is the common genre. So these are the common genre. I have specially written or typed Astra here. It's letter of reply. Letter of reply is pretty common, but is sometimes tricky in the exam, because some content points come from the letter that is given as a data file, and you have to write the reply. So some points has to be extracted from there as well. Sometimes students forget about it. And again, the tone, it's very important. When you're writing this out, you have to know who you're writing to. It's very similar to paper 2, the writing task. Time management, as I just said, very, very important. There are 2 approaches that you can use for part B. So there are some people would choose all the content, find the content points for 1 task each time. So you use 1 color for 1 task, and then find the points and then do the writing. So then I would say it's 20 minutes for the shortest task, 25 minutes for the mid-length task, and then 30 minutes for the longest task. Usually, I can only say usually, task 8 is shorter, task 9 is longer, and task 10 is the longest, but it doesn't necessarily fall into this category, so you have to pay attention to. And approach 2, it's to find all the content points for all the tasks first, and then, so your time allocation will change a little bit. So you have 5 minutes preparation time before the recording for part B, and then you can spend another 15 minutes for during the task during the time left, the 90 minutes, spend 15 minutes to find all the points first, and then writing it about 20 minutes each task. I would say if you are aiming at lower level, maybe like a level 4, then go for approach 1. Usually, these kind of students will spend most of their time finding the points instead of writing it. So if you think about it, you spend all your time looking for the points, but at the end of the exam, you couldn't finish the task, then you will still get 0 mark for the last 2 tasks. So it's safer if you chose approach 1. And for approach 2, it's for those students who are more capable. If you're more capable, find all the points, you have a more comprehensive view of what you have to do. And sometimes after you've read all the data files, then you'll find that some information you might have missed. And then they might share, like different tasks might share the same data file page. So this is probably better if you're aiming for a higher score. And utilizing your time is very important. A lot of students, when they have that 5 minutes preparation time before the recording, they spend their time doing nothing, sitting there relaxing a little bit, and maybe just quickly go through the data file. If I were you, I would go through the checklists and prepare for your note-taking parts in the recording. I would check it against your note-taking parts, sheets, and your checklist. I'll check it against each other so that I know what I should be listening for in the recording. And now we come to the last paper, paper 4, speaking. It's an 8-minute discussion and a 1-minute individual response. Again, well, this is different from paper 1 and paper 3. It's not part A plus part B. It's part A, 28 marks. There are 4 domains. The maximum mark for each domain is 7 marks. And for part B, it depends on, actually, the score mostly depends on your performance in part A. And for part B, individual response is just plus or minus 1 mark in each domain. So there will be a 4-mark difference at maximum. So group discussion, the time management is also very important during the preparation time. 10 minutes preparation seems long, but it's actually very short if you really get to do it. So you should really spend 2 minutes on reading or extracting information from the text that you're given. And then you should spend 5 minutes. 5 minutes is pretty short if you think about really having to generate ideas in 3 different areas. And then you can spend 2 minutes considering others' ideas. A lot of students spend time only on these 2 areas, the first 2 areas. But if you don't spend time thinking about what your group mates is going to say, it's going to harm you in a way that you would probably be copying from each other's point and you're not interacting with each other. I always tell my students it's no harm to disagree as long as you have a good reason. And the last very important minute is to rehearse that in your head once. Rehearse that in your head. What are you going to say? What if your group mate's going to say a different idea? What are you going to respond? How are you going to respond to that? And how I would use, you will be given an A5 note card. How I would use the space is you can use both sides of it. You can use both sides of it if you have a lot to say. If not, just make a cross. Usually there are 3 different areas that you have to think about, and then another bullet point on any other areas that you think important. So make a cross give it 4 different areas, or you can split the paper into 2 parts on one page and then another 2 parts on the other page. Then it gives you a little bit more space if you want to write. Remember, never to write down the whole sentence of what you're going to say. It doesn't work like that because you will be reading aloud for sure. I'm pretty sure you'll be reading aloud, and that will affect your interaction score as well. Another thing, interact with your peers. Listen to what people have to say. A lot of candidates, what they do is they only want to say what they want to say, and they don't listen to others, and they don't respond to others. It's more like a full mini presentation other than a group discussion. So remember, interact with them. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't really matter at all what you say. But interact with each other, listen to others, respond to others. That's what most important in a group discussion. And then in the individual response, you can ask to the examiner to repeat the question once, or you can ask him or her to change the question for you. But bear that in mind, once they have started the timer, it will not stop. You can ask for another question, but the timer is still ticking. So you're kind of wasting your time if you are asking them to repeat or you ask them to change a question. What you should do if you don't really understand what the examiners are saying, try to get the keywords, grab the keywords that he or she was using, and then expand from that. Think about it, it's only going to be 1 minute. It's long if you are scared, but it's short when you are not. You can also refer to the text in part A. It's always related to part A, so you can always relate your question with the keywords to part A and give an answer. Practice is very important. Practice. Think about it, if I suddenly ask you a question and you have 1 minute to answer, that would be very, very difficult. So practice really, well, it doesn't make perfect, I'm afraid, but it makes better. Practice makes better. So this is what you really have to think about. So, and then the last part will be school-based assessment. You have to read or watch 2 to 4 texts. It would be print fiction, non-print fiction. So it looks a little bit messy here, I know. Print fiction, anything you see print is a book, okay? Print fiction, so a story. Non-print means a movie or a documentary. So non-print means it's not a book, so it's something you can watch, okay? Fiction, it's a story. Non-fiction is not a story, so it could be a documentary. So you have to do it within 3 years. There will be at least 1 mark from print and 1 text from non-print, 1 discussion and 1 individual presentation. There'll be 2 assessments. Usually it's 2 assessments, but for the next 2023 and 2024, they only have to submit 1 mark. So, normally it should be 2 assessments, 1 in Form 5 and 1 in Form 6, and there will be 2 marks recorded for the SBA. Hints, okay, very important. So you can always check the cutoff scores online. It's everywhere. Don't read it as a Bible. It's not like a Bible that you should really trust heavily on it, but it's a reference that you can always look at to see how good you are doing at the moment. And then another thing is you can look at the reference script from HKEA as well to see how they score paper. So that's all from me today. Thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you soon again.